On a quiet Sunday afternoon, in a modest urban neighborhood wrapped in sunlight and silence, an elderly black man bent over to lift an old armchair. The floral fabric on the seat was frayed and faded, but he carried it with the care of someone who respected where it had come from. The alley was narrow and peaceful, the kind of place where time seemed to move a little slower, until a voice shattered it like glass. "Hey, old man! Stop right there! What the hell do you think you're doing? Cleaning up for your boss or casing the place?" The voice came sharp, cutting the air with arrogance and suspicion. Its owner was a middle-aged white police officer, pot-bellied, sweat-streaked, and smug behind a Ford Interceptor parked haphazardly in the middle of the street. His name was Officer Vincent Gallo, a name the locals knew too well, avoided like a stray bullet. He wasn't just a cop. He was the self-appointed king of this block. And he'd just set his sights on the wrong man. General Marcus Sterling, retired four-star general of the United States Army, paused, gently placing the chair down without making a sound. His back, broad and strong even in old age, had carried the weight of nations. Yet here he was, mistaken for a street scavenger. He exhaled, not from exhaustion, but from the heavy familiarity of moments like these. Disrespect, assumption, and contempt. The trifecta he had known all too well since his boyhood on that very street. He turned slowly. His face bore the marks of a life lived on battlefields and behind war room doors, lined by sleepless nights, deep concern, and unrelenting sacrifice. But his eyes, they still held clarity. Calm, power, the kind of presence that could quiet a room or lead men through fire. He was back in the house he grew up in, a modest brick home with peeling blue paint, helping his sister Martha, a retired schoolteacher, clean out their childhood garage. No cameras, no honor guards, no Pentagon aides. Just a man reconnecting with his roots, trying to find peace in simpler things. But peace was a luxury that men like Gallo didn't believe black men like Sterling deserved. "Your sister, huh? You look more like a junk picker to me," Gallo sneered. "You people are the reason we've got so much theft around here." General Sterling remained silent for a moment. He understood men like this, men who mistook the quiet dignity of restraint for weakness. He didn't flinch. He didn't argue. Not yet. He simply responded, his voice low and steady. "This is my sister's house. I'm just helping her clear out a few old things before the donation truck arrives." But it wouldn't matter. Gallo wasn't interested in the truth. He wanted a target, and he thought he'd found the perfect one. What he didn't know, what would shake this city to its core, was that the old man in sneakers and a sweatshirt wasn't just another retiree on a rundown street. He was the sword America called in moments of true crisis. And today, he was about to remind them why. Officer Gallo's boots scuffed loudly on the cracked pavement as he stepped closer, his eyes narrowing at General Sterling, with a look of cheap authority wrapped in unchecked prejudice. He gestured with a jerk of his chin. "Where's your ID, old man? Show me your papers. Don't tell me you forgot them, because that would be a very bad idea." General Sterling didn't sigh. He didn't roll his eyes. He simply reached into his back pocket and pulled out an old brown leather wallet, aged like him, creased at the edges, soft from years of use. It was the kind of wallet that didn't hold credit cards or glossy business cards, but instead memories, love notes, keepsakes, and identification worn thin from decades of responsibility. He flipped it open slowly and removed two items. One was a Virginia driver's license. The other was a slightly faded but unmistakably official military ID. It had the signature holographic seal, the laser-etched eagle, and a service number encoded in a way only a real military system would recognize. Sterling extended both with calm dignity, the motion deliberate, like every command he'd given on battlefields from Kandahar to Kuwait. Gallo snatched them away as if swiping contraband from a street hustler. His fingers greasy, his face glistening with sweat, he squinted at the name on the card. Then he read it aloud, dragging each word like it was some kind of comedy routine. "General Marcus Sterling, United States Army, retired," he laughed, hard, loud, savage. His belly jiggled under his uniform, and the sound bounced down the alley like a gunshot. "You gotta be kidding me," he howled. "A general? Cleaning trash in this neighborhood? In that outfit? This has to be the most laughable fake I've seen in 20 years. Sterling didn't blink, didn't even look annoyed. He stood there, unshaken, as if he'd heard the laugh of tyrants before and survived far worse than public ridicule. Gallo waved the ID in front of him like it was a ticket to a circus act. Impersonating a senior military officer is a federal crime. You know that? You could be locked up for years. You think jail's just a weekend getaway? His voice rose in pitch, trying to sound more commanding, but it reeked of desperation. He wanted power, control. And this situation, this moment, was supposed to prove to himself and the rookie beside him that he still had it. But Officer Peterson, who had been silent all this time, was no longer so sure. He took a step forward, cautiously eyeing the military ID in Gallo's hand. His brows furrowed. "Sir," he said softly, "that card has all the correct markings. Look at the seal, the microprint under the signature, even the service number. It's not like any fake I've seen. It looks legitimate." Gallo whipped around, eyes blazing. "What did you say?" "I mean," Peterson hesitated, "just that maybe we should double check on the system. Run the ID, just to make sure." Gallo turned red, not the red of embarrassment, but of a man whose pride had just been publicly poked. "Shut up, rookie. You don't get to question me. I've handled more scumbags in a month than you'll see in your whole career. You think I don't know what I'm doing?" Peterson flinched, his cheeks flushed, but he didn't speak again. Gallo turned back to Sterling, eyes full of disdain. "Now, listen here, old man. I could haul you in right now. No one's going to question me. You fit the profile, you're on private property, and you're refusing to cooperate." Sterling tilted his head ever so slightly. "Refusing to cooperate?" he asked. "I just handed you my identification. You have every means available to verify it." "Don't play smart," Gallo snarled. "I know your type. Talk nice, act calm, try to weasel out of things with big words. But that don't work with me. Not here. Not today." General Sterling looked straight at him now, no longer the weathered neighborhood uncle in sweatpants. His voice dropped, not in volume, but in tone, firm, hard, and dangerously calm. "Officer," he said, "you are crossing a very dangerous line. I advise you to listen to your colleague and verify the identification. You are harassing a citizen without cause. You are refusing to acknowledge lawful credentials. And worse, you're allowing your personal bias to cloud your professional duty." Gallo took a step back. Not because he was intimidated, at least not visibly, but because something in Sterling's tone had cut through. It wasn't just authority. It was history, command, consequence. But still, Gallo couldn't let go. His pride was a cage, and he was rattling its bars. "You think that tone scares me?" he asked. "You think quoting rules and sounding fancy is going to get you out of this? In this neighborhood, I'm the law." Sterling didn't respond. Instead, he slowly wiped his hands on his pants, a small, ordinary gesture. Then he reached into his sweatshirt pocket and pulled out an old flip phone. He didn't dial it, just opened it. To Gallo, it looked like a nervous gesture. Maybe the old man was calling a lawyer, or bluffing. But it wasn't a bluff. Because on Sterling's wrist, beneath the faded cuff of his sleeve, was a rugged Timex watch. And on that watch, hidden beneath what looked like a normal button, was a military-grade emergency beacon, encrypted, satellite-linked, and used only in situations labeled immediate national threat. Sterling pressed it, silently, discreetly, no light, no sound. And just like that, the wheels of a different justice system began turning. One that didn't wear blue uniforms. One that didn't ask for IDs twice. One that came in black SUVs and answered only to the flag. What Gallo didn't know, and what he would soon regret, was that his authority ended at the curb. Because in a few minutes, this alley wouldn't belong to him anymore. Gallo's face twisted as he saw Sterling flip open the old cell phone. The move wasn't aggressive. If anything, it looked harmless. But to Gallo's overinflated ego, it was defiance. He'd given the man orders, barked accusations, laughed in his face, and now the old man had the audacity to call for backup? "Give me that damn phone!" Gallo growled. He lunged forward, thick fingers outstretched to snatch it, but General Sterling was faster. Not in speed, but in purpose. With the calm precision of a man who dodged landmines and led men through gunfire, Sterling turned slightly, keeping the phone just out of reach. It wasn't fear in his eyes. It was calculation. "You're obstructing a federal officer," Gallo barked, still reaching. "I'm placing you under arrest for impersonation, disorderly conduct, and resisting." His hand was inches from Sterling's shoulder when it happened. The first sound was subtle, just a low, metallic whine like something heavy sliding on asphalt. Then came the screeching roar of tires gripping pavement, violent and sharp from both ends of the narrow street. Two unmarked black Chevrolet Suburbans burst onto the scene, one from the east and one from the west, moving with terrifying speed and synchronized precision. They stopped simultaneously, boxing in the alley like a perfect military maneuver. Doors swung open in a fluid blur. 6 men emerged, civilian clothes, but with the unmistakable bearing of elite warriors. Their bodies moved with the efficiency of trained predators, their eyes scanning every detail. Their jackets shifted just enough to reveal concealed holsters. Every motion whispered danger, authority, and absolute readiness. They didn't shout. They didn't threaten. They just were. And their presence said everything. Gallo froze mid-motion, his hand hovering in the air like a fool caught stealing candy. Officer Peterson, who had stood quietly beside him, stiffened like a statue. Then came the man who led them. Tall, clean-cut, and radiating control, he moved through the line of agents like a general on parade. His name was Lieutenant Colonel John Connor, former Delta Force, current head of General Sterling's personal security team, a man who had stood beside Sterling in Mosul, Fallujah, Kandahar, and now here in the alley of a forgotten neighborhood. His voice was calm, unshaken, cold steel wrapped in federal authority. "Police officers," he said, "drop your weapons. Step back immediately. You are interfering with the personal security of a senior officer in the Department of Defense. This is a violation of federal law." Gallo turned slowly toward him, blinking, sweat now visibly pooling at his collar. His mouth opened, but no sound came. Connor didn't blink, didn't even look impressed. "You will not lay another hand on General Sterling. You will not speak to him. You will stand where you are until federal agents arrive. Do not escalate this further." Gallo opened his mouth again, trying to form words, but they caught in his throat. "I don't know who you people think you are," he said, the bravado draining from his tone. "This is a local matter. You can't just roll in here and interrupt a lawful police procedure. You're obstructing justice." His voice cracked on justice. Connor raised one eyebrow. "We don't obstruct justice, officer. We execute it." Before Gallo could sputter a reply, the quiet was broken by another sound, a deeper, more chilling one. From the far end of the street came a slow, rumbling approach. A black Cadillac limousine, the kind known only as the Beast, crept into view, its heavy frame flanked by 2 Secret Service SUVs with hazard lights flashing silently. It was a motorcade fit for a head of state. The neighbors, drawn by the noise and the sudden appearance of black vehicles, began peeking through windows. Curtains fluttered. Cell phones rose. The limousine rolled to a halt just inches from General Sterling. The driver stepped out and opened the rear passenger door, and out stepped the Secretary of Defense. James Matthews, tall and silver-haired, in a sharp black suit, exuded the kind of presence that came from decades of commanding respect. His gaze was piercing, his expression unreadable. He walked past the Suburbans, past the security team, and stopped directly in front of General Sterling, giving the old soldier a brief nod. "I apologize for the delay, General," he said, his voice low but firm. "It seems we have some complications in your old neighborhood." Then he turned. His eyes landed on Gallo like spotlights in an interrogation room. Officer Gallo's bravado collapsed like a house of cards. His lips quivered. His hand, still clutching his baton, shook. He looked from the secretary to the agents, to the security team, then back at the general. And for the first time, he realized what he'd done. Secretary Matthews took a slow step toward him. His voice was colder than before, measured, icy. "Would you like to explain to me," he said, "why you attempted to arrest one of the United States military's highest-ranking officers, a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a national war hero, and perhaps most damning, why you attempted to extort him for money under threat of imprisonment?" Gallo tried to speak. Nothing came out. His baton slipped from his hand and clattered to the ground. His knees nearly buckled, and he might have fallen if Officer Peterson hadn't instinctively reached out and steadied him. Peterson himself looked pale as paper, his mouth slightly agape. This was not the routine patrol he had trained for. This was a career-ending disaster. Matthews said nothing more. He simply turned to one of his aides and gave a subtle nod. The aide lifted a sleek, government-issued satellite phone, pressed two buttons, and spoke a single phrase. Activate federal response. Immediate corruption suppression. Confirmed target. It was done. Within minutes, the air would be thick with sirens. The FBI was already en route. But for Gallo, time had stopped. He had just mocked a general, threatened a living legend, tried to extort the embodiment of service and honor. And now, with the world watching, neighbors recording, agents surrounding, the Secretary of Defense looming, he was exposed as nothing more than what he was. A bully in uniform, about to be undone by the very system he thought he controlled. The air was thick with silence, charged, electric, the kind of silence that comes not from peace, but from pressure. Secretary Matthews didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The look on his face was enough to send tremors through the foundation of the 14th precinct. With one small nod, he signaled to his aide, the same aide who had stood quietly beside him, a black suit framing a sharp focus. The man reached into his coat, retrieved a secure satellite phone, and placed a call using a channel known only to federal authorities. He didn't ask permission. He didn't check the time. He spoke 6 words into the receiver. Initiate federal task force. High priority target. No one needed to guess who the target was. The response was immediate. The FBI's Corruption Suppression Unit, already on alert due to increasing complaints from this part of the city, mobilized with the precision of a well-oiled machine. They were given full jurisdiction. Within 30 minutes, a convoy of black sedans bearing the gold letters FBI arrived with chilling calm. They didn't turn on their sirens. They didn't make a scene. They were the storm that followed the quiet before. Officer Vincent Gallo didn't resist. Not because he was noble, but because he had nothing left to fight with. His badge no longer held weight. His words had turned into noise. The arrogance that once fueled him had evaporated under the scrutiny of real power. When the agent stepped out, bulletproof vests zipped, federal warrants in hand, he looked like a man already halfway gone. They read him his Miranda rights with perfect clarity. You have the right to remain silent, they began, and Gallo, once full of noise, was utterly silent. His hands were cuffed behind his back, not by the rookie beside him or any fellow officer, but by agents trained to dismantle criminal enterprises. The symbolism was undeniable. The same force Gallo had claimed to represent was now the one hauling him away. The list of charges was staggering. Extortion under false pretenses, obstruction of a federal officer, violation of civil rights, abuse of authority, attempted impersonation enforcement, and perhaps most damning, contempt against a senior military officer. It was the kind of list that made bail irrelevant and prison inevitable. As Gallo was led away, the neighborhood began to breathe again. Curtains twitched, doors creaked open. What had started as a routine encounter between a cop and an old man had turned into a federal intervention witnessed by dozens. Then came the local authorities. The mayor, pale as chalk, arrived in a rush, trailed by the city's police chief, whose lips were tight and white with tension. Both had received explosive phone calls, one from the office of the Secretary of Defense, the other from the governor himself. There was no grand speech, just apologies, stammered, shallow, and desperate. General Sterling, the mayor began, bowing his head, on behalf of the city. I can't express how sorry we are. This should never have happened. We'll ensure this never happens again. The police chief echoed the same sentiment, but his words were more defensive than remorseful. His eyes flicked nervously between the FBI agents and Secretary Matthews, as if calculating how much of his own future had just evaporated. General Sterling, still in his worn sweatshirt and dusty sneakers, said nothing for a long moment. Then, with the quiet authority that had guided entire divisions through war, he simply said, "Thank you, but right now I just want to finish helping my sister." And with that, he turned back toward the house, toward the cardboard boxes and the cluttered garage, toward the armchair he had set down before everything began. But the fire he'd sparked would not be so easily extinguished. Within days, the investigation into Gallo expanded into a full-scale probe of the entire 14th precinct. Tips and testimonies flooded in, anonymous complaints, whistleblowers, reports long buried under bureaucracy. What emerged was a systemic pattern of abuse. Racial profiling, extortion of immigrants, falsified reports, planted evidence. The FBI launched what they called Operation Clean Shield, And it didn't stop with Gallo. Several other officers were arrested. 2 sergeants were indicted. Internal affairs was placed under federal review. The precinct that had once been feared for its lawlessness was now under 24/7 surveillance. And in every report, every headline, one name kept resurfacing: Officer Vincent Gallo. Not as a hero, not as a protector, but as the face of a failed system. Peterson, the rookie who had once tried to speak up, found himself torn between fear and responsibility. But the choice became clear when the FBI asked to speak with him. At first, he hesitated, nerves tightening his throat. But when he remembered the way Sterling had stood tall in the face of humiliation, when he remembered the demand to "shut up, rookie," and the bile in Gallo's threats, he made a decision. He told them everything. About Gallo's behavior, about the intimidation tactics used on civilians, about the whispered stories in the locker room, the bribes, the planted evidence. He gave names, dates, and specifics. The FBI was astonished by the level of access he had. Peterson had been too invisible to notice, and that had made him the perfect observer. For his safety, Peterson was placed under federal witness protection. His name scrubbed, his file sealed. His time in uniform was over, but his service had just begun. Later, in a reflective interview with a federal agent, he said quietly, "I thought I joined the police to be one of the good guys. I didn't know the uniform could be worn by villains too." He didn't return to law enforcement. He enrolled in law school under an assumed identity, determined to one day fight for justice in the courts, where the law could no longer be bent by the loudest voice or the dirtiest badge. And back in that modest brick house, General Sterling never once asked for recognition. He refused interviews, declined TV appearances. He simply told his sister Martha, "Let's finish clearing that shelf." Because for him, justice wasn't about spectacle. It was about results. It wasn't about punishment. It was about purification of a precinct, of a system, of a nation. And while the agents filed reports and the mayor drafted reform proposals, the man who had quietly summoned a national reckoning returned to his quiet task, lifting the past, piece by piece, out of the garage and into the light. As the FBI vehicles pulled away and the neighborhood gradually returned to its slow, steady rhythm, General Marcus Sterling stood quietly for a moment beside the same battered armchair that had started it all. The sun was lower in the sky now, casting a golden hue across the brick walls and pavement. The echo of outrage, sirens, and snapping authority had faded, replaced by birdsong and the distant hum of lawnmowers. It was, once again, a peaceful Sunday. He bent down, not as a hero, not as a general, not as a symbol, but simply as a brother helping his sister. With both hands, he lifted the old armchair, placing it gently next to the boxes waiting for the Salvation Army truck. It creaked beneath his grip, not unlike the bones in his back, but he made no complaint. He wasn't the kind of man to brag about battles won. To anyone watching now, it might have seemed like nothing had happened. But everything had changed. This alley, once the domain of bullies in uniform, had become the front line of a different kind of war. The war for integrity, for accountability, for dignity. And in that war, Marcus Sterling had not raised his voice, not thrown a punch, not drawn a weapon. He had simply stood his ground. Because the fight for justice isn't always fought on foreign soil, with tanks and drones and headlines. Sometimes it's fought with silence, with restraint, with the decision to endure humiliation for a few more seconds, to give truth the time it needs to arrive. The real battlefield? It's on porches, in alleys, in offices, in the quiet corners of neighborhoods where forgotten men still carry burdens and where arrogance still tries to assert its power over humility. To clean a garage is one thing, Sterling had once said to his staff at the Pentagon. But to clean a system takes more than strength. It takes courage and history. He believed that. He lived that. Because for Marcus Sterling, true power was never in medals or uniforms. It wasn't in salutes or ceremonies. It was in the moments when no one was watching, when you chose to do what was right, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it was dangerous. And that choice, made without cameras, without applause, is what would echo long after. Gallo would be remembered, but only as the one who fell. Sterling? He would be remembered as the one who quietly picked up a chair, even after shaking the pillars of corruption. And in the days to come, this moment, this brief, almost forgotten confrontation in a sunlit alley, would ripple through institutions, hearings, networks of command, and halls of Congress. What began as an insult would end as an inquiry. What began as a laugh would become legislation. And what began with a chair on the curb would become a movement.